This presentation is just going to be an overview of the UDK Class Hierarchy. So that will be the core classes that we'll be using throughout this tutorial series in the Unreal Script API. So as I just said, this is an overview of the core classes in UDK. This presentation is about making you aware of the UDK class structure and just offering you a starting point for learning your way around it and how the API generally works. So firstly, Object is the base class for everything in Unreal. It just defines the base functionality for everything. You cannot create a new class without extending from Object in a minimum. Classes extended from Object are usually data-centric. Now, Actor inherits Object. Now, this is the base class for something that exists within or needs access to the scene. So this defines all the relevant scene-centric functionality. An example of this would include adding components, searching the scene for certain actors, and also raycasting and tracing. So this is what I would describe as a general overview of how the structure works. So you have Object as the absolute base class, and Actor extends from Object, and down from Actor, every new class that you extend from Actor, they are generally scene-oriented classes. So this includes stuff like your game rules and how they interact with the world, and also physical representations of objects in the scene. Now, things that extend directly from Object I would usually describe as data-oriented classes. These don't need access to the scene and exist purely for data purposes. That was just a quick coverage of actors and objects. I'll be doing a more in-depth coverage and also how to use them in another tutorial, but for the moment that's just a brief overview of what they are. Another important class is Game Info. This is extended from Actor. It defines the rules for a game. It handles things such as player creation and management, level transitions. It's generally for managing the rules of a certain game. Some examples of Game Info are Framework Game and UT Game. So these extend from Game Info and define custom game rules. Controller is a class that handles the behavior of an entity in the world. So it basically represents an intelligent actor or an agent. So it specializes into two subcategories, one of which is a player controller, another is an artificial intelligence controller. So a player controller is for letting a player interact with the world and play the game. AI controller is for an AI entity. So again, a player controller is used to control a player, so it defines the gameplay logic and implementations for how a player interacts with the world and how they'd physically play your game. An AI controller is used to control an artificial intelligence entity, so you use it to provide logic for things such as gameplay and decision making relevant to how that AI entity should use the world and navigate its way around. Another important class is the pawn. So this is a physical representation of a controller in the world. It's not limited to one controller, and I'll get more into this in a later tutorial, but generally use it for things that directly interact with the scene. So animation controlling, and also things like physics. So some other classes of interest that I recommend that you look up in your spare time as you're browsing through the UDK class hierarchy are the camera, the world info, player input, and game viewport client. So they're all quite important classes, but they're not relevant to the absolute core of UDK, which is just what I wanted to cover in this presentation. On an ending note, whenever you're programming your own Unreal game, at a minimum you should be using a custom game info, a custom player controller, and a custom pawn. If you're ever in doubt and you need to start a new game, the best way to do so is using the basic game quick start guide that you can find on the Unreal documentation website, and using this as a basis for your games. And this includes things like a custom game info, a custom player controller, a custom pawn, and also an implementation of a third-person camera, which is always extremely useful.